Delighted with my next guest to come here, General Chip Chapman, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon, Jeremy. I'm Tickety-boo.
Tickety-boo? Goodness me. Tickety-boo's become a bit of a pin-up, old Chip, haven't you? Can you do me a favour? Layman's terms here, because you're supremely more intelligent than me. Southport attacker. In July, before the riots started, Nigel Farage tweeted on X, I think the government need to be more transparent. This is terror related. Now, this morning our leader stood up, hauled before, I have to say, the national media, and admitted he knew about the Southport killers' extremist history and terror links, but he said that he didn't want to prejudice the Rudakubana trial. Now, that doesn't really stand up, because in other situations, stuff like that has been released a minimal amount of information. That's not incorrect, is it, Chip?
Some of it is. So if the attack happened on the 29th of July,
yep,
the riot spanned the 30th of July to the 5th of August. Now, what you knew in that first 24 hours is there's been mass criminal murder. Someone was put in the bag and would be prosecuted for that. And there's a notion that, or there has been a notion from Genric and others, for example, that the public had a right to know the truth straight away, but that's actually not true. So the law limits what can be released prior to a trial, and at the time his age was also relevant. He was 17. So we were given the info we needed. Someone had been arrested, people had been killed, the public was safe, and the families and children were supported. What then powered things, of course, was there was this notion via disinformation by anonymous trolls and bots that this guy was an asylum seeker,
yep,
who was in a hostel.
Yep.
And he wasn't. Of course, he was born in Cardiff of random...
But why didn't they... You're not going to tell me that we prejudiced his trial to have come out at that stage when this stuff is stirring up on social media, when it led to what happened, and I don't condone anything that happened on the streets, and in fact, I was very supportive of Starmer crushing that very quickly. However, surely the Prime Minister could have said at that point, listen, this is terror-related. It was quite easy to work that out, seeing as how there was an Al-Qaeda guidebook, it seems, that you can get on anything. There was weapons, there was Ricin, apparently. But what I'm saying is, wouldn't that have got rid of that vacuum of uncertainty that led to the riot? Surely today he should have said, I could have said a little bit more and done more and maybe helped the situation.
That again would be true if that timeline were the case, but it wasn't, because the investigation and the exploitation of the house and the seeing the Ricin would have pushed that to the right. So you'd be absolutely right to say that there are two charges against him, one of which is possession of a terrorist manual, and that is a terrorist offence under Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. But I suspect on that one, for example, that was really a how do I kill lots of people, rather than I am. Is he an Al-Qaeda terrorist? I suspect not. If I was to sort of ask him, because of his age, for example, if he knew who Osama bin Laden was.
Listen, you're the expert. You're the expert, Chip. But many people contacting the show are confused, and they're confused about one thing. Sir Keir Starmer, yes, the people that watch this probably not his biggest fans, but he is our Prime Minister. He was elected. He has a majority. He was, of course, the Director of Public Prosecutions. He's very loyally, which many people thought was a good idea after the debacle of the last however many years. However, what I'm saying to you is the pulse of this nation is beating on many fronts, and I wonder whether that would have been an opportunity, irrespective of timelines, to have said at some point a little bit more. For example, he came out and was very fervent that all the riots were far right, and he dealt with those. Today, Yvette Cooper announces a public inquiry, quite rightly, into the appalling murders. I don't want to drag you into something you don't want to talk about, but they utterly refuse to have a public inquiry into the rape gangs that have decimated so many areas over many, many years. And I think that's why people, Chip, if I'm being honest, are frustrated by what they see as a lack of consistency.
No, I think you're right there, Jeremy. So, for example, although I mentioned, and this is absolutely true, that there were anonymous trolls and bots who were partly giving the disinformation which powered the riots, there were also people who didn't riot, of course, who were fed up. And it's that constituency which is the majority. And, of course, the inquiry which he's now mentioned, after the kicking they got over the rape gangs, is good politics. It's quick and decisive. after the charge or the fact that he's now pleaded guilty. Where Starmer comes from on this, and he's absolutely right, is that sometimes due to legal restrictions, which would sway judges, you have to be juries, you have to be very careful of what is put into the public domain. Neither does it mean that CT, counter-terrorist police involvement, does not mean it's terrorism. You're often drawn in when following murders, political murders, or mass killings where the motive is uncertain. Now, it's worth saying at the moment, this is still not a terrorist case. So when he went to court previously...
It's not a terrorist case, but he had an Al-Qaida handbook and he'd been made Ricin. Now, how is that not a terrorist case? I don't understand that.
You have to separate two things again, Jeremy. There are terrorist charges there,
yep.
But was the terrorist motivation in the killings? What the 13th of November said was that the stabbings were alleged to have been not in furtherance of terrorism, and that murder and the attempted murder charges are not alleged to have a terrorist connection.
But Yvette Cooper said in the House of Commons this afternoon he will be treated as a terrorist in jail.
Well, what will come out is when he is sentenced on Thursday, there are often cases when when it is unclear,
yep.
And therefore the judge makes a determination on what he thinks is the predominant thing. This is what happened, for example, after the Hartlepool killing on the 15th of October 23. You'll remember that was a week after the 7th of October.
Yeah.
It was uncertain, and it was the judge who made that determination. That is what I think will happen on Thursday, but he will also probably, I think, mention something about the mental health issues. Now, I know people don't like this, but again, it came out in August that this guy was on the autism spectrum disorder.
I think you can have mental health and still be a terrorist. Sorry.
You can, absolutely. And there have been lots of cases of that in the last few years.
I hope that isn't an excuse that is used to let him get away with what was a heinous crime. Just one thing, Chip, and it's really interesting to get a different perspective. You made a point, and this is the one final thing that I would say to you. You say that the lawyer that Starmer is will know that there are certain things you cannot be putting in the public domain. I put this to you, Major General Chip Chapman. The day he stood up and politicised those riots by saying these people were far right, despite the fact that he told us there were no police, no judges and no prison spaces, quite rightly, before you jump at me, within a few hours, certainly 24, people were rounded up on Sky Television, tried and put in jail. Do you not think him calling them far-right thugs, some of whom you've just admitted were just hacked off with what was going on, do you not think that prejudiced their trial? Because I absolutely think it did. So there's a difference, isn't there? What is the difference?
Well, probably not. I mean, some of those were racist gang violence. I mean, attacking asylum hotels, even if you don't like them being...
Yeah, but writing stuff on social media that is unfair and wrong and being put in prison for 15 months for it, to me, I think this is another issue. And I get, listen, I hope this guy rots in hell for all eternity. I think it's heinous and I think it's horrible. I think we have to learn from it. But I do think that there was, at that moment, I'm afraid, again, like the police, a two-tier approach. If you are saying, I can't say anything because of this trial, why did you call all those people on the streets far-right thugs? Because I had calls from people who were just frustrated. I remember a nurse saying, I'm sick and tired of immigration, I'm sick and tired of this government. I now can't say that for fear of being labelled a far-right thug. Remember that call?
Yeah, that probably is true on the call, but that's not why you're put in prison. You don't have to attend a riot to be charged with conspiracy to riot. Yep. You can be guilty of encouraging it.
Do you think it was too... Do you think that... Do you see the criticism from people? If he couldn't speak about that man being a terrorist for fear of jeopardising his case, but he can label everybody far right who took to the streets?
Yeah, I think you have to, when you're a leader, you have to be careful of the language you use. And I think he could have been more careful on that occasion. As I said, I think it was a complex Venn diagram of people who were involved in the Southport and wider riots at the time.
Finally, before you go, great to have you. What did you make of Donald Trump yesterday?
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting 4 years. It would be lovely if he can bring universal peace to the world. I do worry slightly about American exceptionalism. I do really want a rules-based international order. But But if I've got something on my Christmas list for 2025 on my bingo card, if he can bring a just peace to Ukraine, I'd be very content.
Good man. Thank you. So good to have you on. A good perspective. Major General Chip Chapman.